Korean Mafia boss called his ex-wife to humiliate her. 3 children picked instead. The screen connected on the 3rd ring. Jae-won Choi cleared his throat, ready to sound bored, ready to sound rich, ready to sound like a man who had never once thought about the woman on the other end. But the camera did not show her face. It showed a ceiling fan, then a blur of motion, then 3 small faces pressed together, all fighting for space in front of the phone. "Are you the cookie guy?" one of them shouted, his cheeks smeared with something sticky. Another one shoved him aside. "No, he is not the cookie guy. He is the internet man. He has to fix the Wi-Fi." Jae-won opened his mouth to correct them, but no words came out, because staring back at him were 3 sets of eyes, dark and sharp, eyes he saw every single morning in his own mirror. His hand started shaking. 3 years, he thought. 3 years since she left. 3 kids. His chest tightened like a fist was closing around it. "Hello?" he finally managed, his voice cracking in a way it had not cracked in years. "Mommy said we cannot talk to strangers," one of the girls said, tilting her head at him with total suspicion. "I am not a stranger," Jae-won whispered, still staring at the screen like it might disappear if he blinked. "Where is your mommy?" The phone tumbled from the small hands holding it, bouncing once on a rug, before landing face up, the ceiling spinning into view again. Jae-won heard scrambling feet, muffled giggling, and then a new voice cut through the noise, sharp and instantly familiar in a way that made his stomach drop straight through the floor. "Minji, Aiden, Sora, who are you talking to? Give me that phone right now, you know the rules." The phone was snatched up, and for one long, suspended second, all Jae-won saw was a woman's chin, then her mouth, then finally her eyes. Emily Bennett went completely still. Her lips parted like she wanted to speak, but nothing came out. Her hand trembled so badly the phone shook with it. "Jay," she whispered, so quietly he almost did not catch it. He wanted to say something. He wanted to say 100 things, all 4 years, or 3 years, of rehearsed anger rising in his throat at once. But before a single word could leave his mouth, the call disconnected. Jae-won sat there on his leather couch in the middle of his penthouse, staring at a black screen, his own reflection staring back at him. His hands would not stop shaking. He pressed redial. It rang once, twice, then went straight to voicemail. He tried again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. He set the phone down slowly, like it might explode, and pressed both palms against his face, dragging them down until they rested over his mouth. 3 kids, he said out loud to no one. 3 years. The door to his office opened without a knock, because only 2 people in the world had that privilege. Do-yoon walked in first, holding a paper bag of takeout, with Min-soo trailing behind him scrolling through his phone. "We got the noodles you like," Do-yoon said, dropping the bag on the desk. "Extra spicy, just how you pretend you can handle it." Jae-won did not respond. Do-yoon stopped walking, immediately reading the silence the way only a lifelong friend could. "What happened?" Do-yoon asked, his tone shifting completely. "I called her," Jae-won said. "I called Emily." Min-soo looked up from his phone so fast he nearly dropped it. "You actually did it. I thought that was just talk, after the 3rd bottle of soju." "I wanted to make her feel small," Jae-won admitted, his voice hollow. "I wanted her to hear how well I am doing without her. I had the whole thing planned out." "And?" Do-yoon asked carefully, sitting on the edge of the desk. 3 kids picked up the phone, Jae-won said. 3 of them, all talking over each other, all calling me the internet man. Do-yoon blinked. Min-soo actually laughed, a short surprised bark of a sound, before catching himself and clearing his throat. "Okay, wait. Back up," Min-soo said, holding up a hand. 3 kids. As in her kids. "They have my eyes," Jae-won said, finally looking up at both of them. "Both of you know my eyes. Everyone always said I got them from my father. These kids have the exact same ones. All 3 of them." The room went quiet. Do-yoon exchanged a look with Min-soo, the kind of look two people share when they both suspect something, but neither wants to say it first. 3 years since she left, Do-yoon said slowly. 3 kids, Min-soo added, doing the same math out loud, his voice dropping. Jae-won stood up and started pacing the length of the office, his dress shoes clicking against the marble floor. She left me, he said, his voice rising. She told me she found somebody else. She said we were too young, that it was not going to work, and she got in her car and she drove away, and I stood in that parking lot like an idiot, waiting for her to turn around. She never came back, though, Do-yoon said gently. And you never heard from her again after that. Because she was pregnant, Jae-won said, stopping mid-step. She was pregnant, and she never told me. Min-soo set his phone down completely, giving Jae-won his full attention now. You do not know that for sure yet. I know exactly what I saw, Jae-won snapped, then immediately dragged a hand through his hair, exhaling hard. I am sorry. I am not angry at you. I am angry at everything. Do-yoon walked over and put a hand on his shoulder, steady the way he always had been, since they were teenagers, sneaking into the back of movie theaters together. Your mother was never kind to her, he said quietly. We both remember that. She made it very clear Emily did not belong in this family. Jae-won's jaw tightened at the mention of his mother. That was a long time ago, he said. Was it though? Min-soo asked. Because from where I am standing, it sounds like Emily ran from something and I do not think it was you. Jae-won did not answer right away. His mind had already dragged him backward, pulling him into a memory he had buried under years of boardrooms and quiet, controlled anger. He was 17 again, sitting on the hood of his old car in the parking lot behind their high school, Emily leaning against his shoulder, both of them staring up at a sky littered with stars neither of them could actually name. She always talked about wanting a small house with a garden and too many pets. He always talked about wanting to get as far away from his family's business as possible, to build something that was entirely his own, untouched by his mother's expectations. We will figure it out, she used to say, lacing her fingers through his. Together. He remembered the winter before she left, the two of them racing down an icy sidewalk, her laughing so hard she nearly fell, grabbing onto his jacket to steady herself, both of them collapsing into a snowbank in a tangle of limbs and breathless laughter. He remembered thinking in that exact moment that he had never been happier in his entire life. Then he remembered the week everything changed. His mother had asked to speak with Emily alone, just the two of them, in the sitting room of the family estate. The door closed. Emily came out of that room pale, quiet, her eyes red-rimmed in a way she refused to explain. A week later she was gone. I met somebody else, she had told him, refusing to look him in the eye. We are just kids, Jay. It was fun while it lasted, but it is over. He had begged her to talk to him properly, standing outside her apartment for hours in the freezing cold until her neighbor finally told him to go home. He remembered driving back to his dorm that night and breaking down completely, the kind of crying that hollows a person out from the inside, the kind he never let anyone see again after that night. He shut down after that. He buried the heartbreak under work, under meetings, under building an empire so large that nobody would ever again have the power to make him feel small, the way losing her had. Jae-won blinked back into the present, Do-yoon and Min-soo both watching him carefully. I need to find her, Jae-won said finally, his voice steady now, stripped of all its earlier shock. And say what exactly? Min-soo asked. You planned an entire speech to humiliate her, and instead you found out you have triplets. Where does the ego trip go from here? I do not care about the ego trip anymore, Jae-won said quietly. I care about the fact that there are 3 kids out there with my eyes, and I do not know their names. I do not know their birthdays. I do not know anything about them. Do-yoon nodded slowly. Then we find her, he said. What do you have to go on? Her old number connected, Jae-won said, which means it is still active. Min-soo, you are good at this part. Minsu was already typing on his phone, his earlier teasing completely gone, replaced with quiet focus. "Give me an hour," he said. "If she still owns anything under her name, a lease, a utility bill, anything, I will find it." True to his word, less than an hour later, Minsu turned his laptop around to show an address in a small American town Jae-won had never heard of before. A place called Hollow Pine, tucked somewhere in the mountains, the kind of town that looked like it belonged on a postcard. "She has been renting a house there for the last 2 years, Minsu said. "Property records, plus she is tagged in a few local community posts. Looks like there is some kind of harvest festival happening there this weekend." Jae-won stared at the address for a long moment, his heart pounding in a way it had not in years. "Book the flights," he said. "Tonight." "You are really doing this?" Do-yoon asked, though it was not really a question. Jae-won looked up at both of them, something in his expression shifting, the cold, controlled businessman peeling back to reveal something rawer underneath. "I spent 3 years telling myself I hated her," he said quietly. "I am done pretending that is true." The flight to Hollow Pine took almost 14 hours, 3 connections, and one very long layover where Minsu fell asleep sitting upright at the gate while Do-yoon argued with a vending machine that had eaten his money. Jae-won did not sleep at all. He sat by the window the entire time, watching clouds pass beneath him, running through every possible version of what he would say when he finally saw her again. By the time they landed, the sky over Hollow Pine was already turning a soft orange, the kind of light that only exists in small towns right before the first frost sets in. The town square was decorated for the harvest festival, hundreds of small paper lanterns strung between the trees, wooden stalls selling roasted corn and warm cider, the smell of cinnamon and firewood drifting through the cool evening air. Somewhere, a local band was playing something slow on a fiddle, and children ran between the stalls, holding sticky caramel apples in both hands. Jae-won stood at the edge of the square in a dark coat, completely out of place among the flannel jackets and knitted scarves, his eyes scanning the crowd like he was searching for a single face among 1,000. "There," Do-yoon said quietly, nodding toward a stall near the center of the square. Emily was standing near a hot cider cart, her hair pulled back loosely, a light green scarf wrapped around her neck. She looked exhausted in the way only a parent of 3 young children could look exhausted, her eyes constantly darting between them as they ran in different directions. "Sora, do not touch that," Emily called out, reaching for a small girl who had wandered dangerously close to a display of pumpkins stacked in a pyramid. "I want one," Sora said, pointing. "We are not buying a pumpkin the size of you," Emily said, scooping her up onto her hip. Aiden, meanwhile, was trying to convince a nearby dog that he was its long-lost owner, while Min-ji tugged relentlessly on Emily's sleeve, demanding to go on the small carousel set up near the edge of the square. Emily sighed, shifting Sora higher on her hip. "One more ride," she said. "Then we are going home. All of you are covered in sugar, and I refuse to deal with 3 sugar crashes at once." She turned to check on the boys, and that was the exact moment her entire body went still. Standing about 15 feet away, flanked by 2 men she vaguely recognized from a lifetime ago, was Jae-won. He looked older, sharper somehow, dressed like he belonged in a boardroom instead of a small-town harvest festival, but his eyes, when they landed on her, held none of the coldness she expected. They looked terrified, overwhelmed, like a man standing on the edge of something he was not sure he was ready to fall into. Emily's hands started shaking. She quickly set Sora down and gently pushed her toward the boys, keeping her voice as steady as she could manage. "Go stand with your brother and sister for a second, sweetheart," she said. "Mommy needs 1 minute." Sora obeyed, toddling off toward Aiden and Min-ji, who had both finally noticed the stranger staring at their mother and had gone quiet, watching with wide, curious eyes. Emily turned fully to face Jae-won, her arms wrapping around herself as if bracing for impact. "You found me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I did," Jae-won said. For a long moment, neither of them said anything at all, the sound of the fiddle music and distant laughter filling the silence between them. "You should not have come here," Emily said finally, though there was no real conviction behind the words. "I had to," Jae-won said. "I saw them, Emily. I saw their faces on that call, and I have not been able to think about anything else since." Emily's eyes filled with tears, almost instantly, her jaw tightening as she fought to keep them from spilling over. "You were not supposed to see them like that," she said. "You were not supposed to see them at all. Not yet, not like this." "Was there ever going to be a right time?" Jae-won asked, his voice cracking slightly. "Because from where I am standing, it has already been 3 years. "I know," Emily said, her voice breaking completely now. "I know, and I am sorry, but you do not understand what happened after I left." "Then make me understand," Jae-won said, taking a small step closer. "Please, Jen, I am not here to yell at you. I am not here to make a scene in the middle of a festival. I just need the truth." Before Emily could answer, a small voice cut through the tension between them. "Are you the internet man?" Aiden asked, having wandered closer with absolutely no concept of the moment he had just interrupted. Jae-won looked down, and for the first time all evening, something in his chest loosened slightly. He crouched down to the boy's eye level, ignoring the way the cold, wet ground immediately soaked into the knee of his expensive trousers. "I am not the internet man," Jae-won said gently. "My name is Jae." "That is a weird name," Aiden said bluntly, tilting his head. Jae-won let out a short, surprised laugh. "It is a little weird," he agreed. "What is your name?" "Aiden," the boy said proudly. "And that is Sora, and that is Min-ji. We are triplets. We came out of mommy's tummy on the exact same day." "I heard," Jae-won said softly, his eyes stinging in a way he had not expected. Min-ji and Sora had wandered over as well now, staring up at him with the same open curiosity, completely unaware of the storm of emotion happening above their heads. "Do you have kids?" Min-ji asked. Jae-won looked up at Emily, his throat tightening. "I think I might," he said quietly. Emily let out a small broken sound, somewhere between a laugh and a sob, pressing the back of her hand against her mouth. "Mommy, why are you crying?" Sora asked, immediately abandoning all interest in Jae-won to tug on her mother's coat. "I am okay, sweetheart," Emily said, kneeling down to gather all 3 kids into a loose hug, kissing the top of each of their heads. "Mommy is just having a lot of feelings right now." Do-yoon and Min-soo, who had been standing back respectfully, exchanged a glance before Do-yoon cleared his throat. "Why do you 3 not come with us for a minute?" he said, crouching down with an easy smile. "I hear there is a booth over there giving away free caramel apples, and I happen to be an expert taste tester." The kids, thoroughly distracted by the promise of caramel apples, allowed themselves to be led away by Do-yoon and Min-soo, both men throwing Jae-won a quick reassuring glance before disappearing into the crowd with all 3 children in tow. Alone now, Emily wiped her face with the sleeve of her coat and took a slow, steadying breath. "I did not leave because I met someone else," she said quietly. "That was a lie." Jae-won felt something in his chest crack open. "I know," he said. "I knew the second I saw their eyes." "Your mother called me into that room," Emily continued, her voice trembling. "She told me that if I stayed with you, she would make sure you lost everything, your future, your place in the family, all of it. She said I was a mistake that was going to ruin your entire life, and I believed her. I was 20 years old and terrified, and I thought if I loved you enough, I would let you go so you would not lose everything because of me." "You did not let me go," Jae-won said, his voice rising slightly, not out of anger, but out of years of buried grief finally surfacing. "You made that decision for both of us. We were supposed to figure things out together, That is what you always used to say. And instead, you just disappeared. I was pregnant and alone in a new country, Emily said, her voice cracking. I did not know what else to do. I thought I was protecting you. You were protecting me from a life I actually wanted, Jae-won said, stepping closer now, his voice softening. Look at them, Jen. Look at what we made. Did you really think there was any version of my future that made sense without you in it? Emily looked at him then, really looked at him, past the expensive coat and the sharpened jaw and the years that had clearly hardened him. Underneath all of it, she could still see the boy who used to sit with her on the hood of his car, mapping out a future neither of them had been allowed to have. I am sorry, she whispered. The words she had held onto for 3 years, finally breaking free. I am so sorry, Jay. He closed the remaining distance between them, gently reaching up to wipe a tear from her cheek with his thumb, the same way he used to when they were teenagers hiding from the world in the back of his old car. I missed you every single day, he confessed quietly. I tried to hate you, I really did. It did not work. Before either of them could say anything else, a small voice interrupted them yet again, this time belonging to Min-ji, who had somehow slipped away from Do-yoon and Min-soo and was now standing beside them, holding half a caramel apple. Are you going to be our new daddy? Min-ji asked, bluntly, staring up at Jae-won with an expression far too serious for a 3-year-old. Emily froze. Jae-won crouched down slowly, giving the little girl his full attention. I am not a new daddy, he said gently. I am your daddy. I have just been very far away, and it took me a long time to find my way back to you. Min-ji considered this for a moment, chewing thoughtfully on her caramel apple. Okay, she said simply, as if that settled the matter entirely, before wandering back off toward her siblings without another word. Jae-won let out a breathless laugh, standing back up and looking at Emily, who was watching the exchange with tears streaming freely down her face now. That evening, the chaos of 3 young children found its way into the small rented house Emily called home, a cozy space with a crackling fireplace and walls covered in crayon drawings taped up at slightly crooked angles. Do-yoon and Min-soo, who had somehow been recruited into an intense building block competition against Aiden and Sora, sat cross-legged on the living room floor, arguing loudly over whose tower was structurally superior. Min-ji had claimed a spot directly on Jae-won's back, insisting he crawl around the living room pretending to be a bear, a request he fulfilled without a single moment of hesitation, earning delighted shrieks of laughter every time he passed by the couch. Emily stood in the kitchen doorway, mug of tea in hand, simply watching him. She had expected him to be stiff, distant, the hardened businessman she assumed the years had turned him into. Instead, she was watching the same boy she had fallen in love with as a teenager, uninhibited and completely present, as if the last 3 years had never happened at all. You are good with them, she said softly when he finally set Min-ji down and walked over, brushing carpet lint from his trousers. I am trying to make up for lost time, he said, leaning against the counter beside her. Though I am aware, 3 years does not disappear in one evening. We can take things slow, Emily said carefully. This is a lot, for all of us. Your entire life is on the other side of the world. My life is standing in this kitchen, Jae-won said simply. I already told Min-soo to start looking at office space nearby. I can run things remotely just as easily from here as I can from Seoul. Emily stared at him. You would really move everything? She asked. Your entire company. I built that company to fill a hole you left behind, Jae-won said quietly. It never worked. I do not care about board meetings or quarterly reports, Jen. I care about being here for bedtime stories. I care about not missing another single day of their lives. Emily set her mug down, her hands trembling slightly as she reached up to touch his face, as if needing to confirm he was actually real. I love you, she whispered. I never stopped, even when I tried to convince myself I had. Jae-won closed his eyes briefly at her words, before leaning down slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She did not. She met him halfway instead, the kiss soft and hesitant at first. 4 years, 3 years, whatever the number, of grief and longing finally unraveling between them. They broke apart only when a small voice groaned loudly from the living room doorway. "Gross," Aiden announced, covering his eyes dramatically. "You are kissing the internet man." Jae-won laughed against Emily's forehead, pulling back just enough to look at her, his eyes crinkling with the kind of joy his friends had not seen in him in years. "I think we need to have a conversation about nicknames," he said. A few days later, the town hosted its final harvest celebration before the cold fully settled in, complete with a small hayride and a bonfire at the edge of the square. Jae-won arrived at Emily's front porch that morning, carrying 3 small wooden wagons and an oversized thermos, dressed in a thick flannel jacket that made him look far more like a local than the man who had stepped off a plane just days earlier. "I come bearing transportation," he announced, holding the wagons up proudly. "You are really committing to this whole small-town life," Emily said, smiling as she zipped up Sora's jacket. "Do-yoon and Min-soo already claimed the best spot near the bonfire," Jae-won said, kneeling down to help Aiden with his boots. "Apparently there is a very serious hay bale stacking competition happening later, and we cannot lose to your uncles." "We are not losing," Aiden declared fiercely, suddenly filled with competitive fire far beyond his years. The walk to the town square was loud and slow, punctuated by Sora insisting on being carried the entire way, Min-ji stopping every few feet to examine a fallen leaf like it was the most fascinating object in the world, and Aiden attempting to pull his wagon directly through every puddle he could find. Jae-won noticed everything. When Sora stumbled, he caught her before she hit the ground. When Min-ji complained her hands were cold, he pulled off his own gloves and slipped them onto her much smaller hands without a second thought. That evening, as the bonfire crackled and the last golden light faded behind the mountains, Jae-won and Emily sat together on a wooden bench a short distance away, watching the kids chase each other around, with sparklers under Do-hyun and Min-soo's loose supervision. "They are extraordinary," Jae-won said quietly, watching Aiden attempt to convince Min-soo to let him stay up past bedtime through sheer force of negotiation. "I look at them and I see so much of you." "They also have your complete inability to sit still," Emily said, bumping her shoulder against his. "Min-ji took apart the television remote yesterday just to see how it worked." "That is entirely my fault," Jae-won admitted. "I accept full responsibility." A comfortable silence settled between them, filled only by the crackle of the fire and the distant sound of the kids laughing. Jae-won shifted slightly on the bench, turning to face her fully, his expression growing serious. "Jen," he said, "I told you I would take things slow, and I meant that, but I need you to know exactly where I stand, so there is no confusion this time." Emily looked up at him, her heart pounding. "I am not going back to Seoul," Jae-won said. "I already signed the paperwork, transferring my shares to someone I trust completely. I am building something new, something entirely my own, right here. I am not running a company from across an ocean anymore. I am planting myself right here in this town, and I am going to prove to you every single day that I am not going anywhere." Emily's eyes filled with tears again, her hand finding his on the bench between them. "I love you," she said again, steadier this time, the words no longer trembling with fear, but settled with certainty. "I love you too," Jae-won said, "all 4 of you." Before either of them could lean in again, a sparkler-wielding Aiden came barreling toward the bench, followed closely by his sisters, all 3 of them talking over each other about hay bales and caramel apples and whether Uncle Do-yoon had cheated at the stacking competition. Jae-won looked at Emily, laughing, before scooping Sora up into his arms as she demanded to be picked up, Min-ji immediately climbing onto the bench beside them, and Aiden dramatically reenacting the entire hay bale competition from start to finish. Later that night, Long after the bonfire had died down and the kids had finally, exhaustedly, fallen asleep, Jae-won stood on the porch with Emily, looking out at the quiet, snow-dusted street of the only place that had ever truly felt like home. 3 years, he said softly. I spent 3 years thinking I lost everything the day you left. And now? Emily asked, leaning into his side. Now, Jae-won said, wrapping an arm around her, I think I found exactly what I was looking for.